Good afternoon. It is June 16th. We are here for a Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee session on the incentive zoning update, and specifically ZTA 2505, Development Standards, Optional Method, Public Benefits. This is the continuation of an ongoing conversation that started at committee several months ago and is now in the form of a zoning text amendment that we're going to go through today. And with that, let me turn it over to Ms. Nadeau for any thoughts or opening comments. Then we can turn it over to planning to give any introductory remarks on their end of how this came to be, and then we can go through the packet methodically. Thank you.
So as noted, the CTA implements the recommendations of the incentive zoning update. There's a link to it at the top of the page. With that update, if you go read it, it has a lot of additional analysis and rationale for some of the parts in the CTA. I'll do public hearing and impact statements and then turn it over to planning to talk about the project some more. Testimony received was largely in support. Our agricultural groups, both the Agricultural Advisory Committee and Agricultural Preservation Advisory Board, supported the ZTA for strengthening the TDR and BLT programs. We also received a letter from Bethesda Arts and Entertainment Board supporting due to the expansion of the public art incentive density, and then from Strong Towns DC supporting the housing provisions. That letter did note requesting an increase in the standard method FAR for housing. We also received a letter from DPS, specifically the Energy Division, noting that this would support a lot of their energy and sustainability measures. In terms of requested amendments or opposition, there was a letter from Westwood Shopping Center about grandfathering CRT property, a letter from NAOP and MBIA asking for amendments that would relax some of the requirements for developers, and then a letter from the county executive. You'll note the county executive's letter has the comments from his office directly, and then a letter from each department with additional arguments and requested amendments, which I sort of weaved throughout the staff report, so I'll flag them as we go through them. We also have our impact statements, of course. The planning board shockingly supported the incentive zoning update. As noted at the committee sessions in December, this committee is actually lead sponsoring the ZTA and had asked planning and council staff to work together drafting it. So thank you to all of their help with that. The climate assessment was largely positive. It noted that there's no increased density due to this CTA. It's just increasing the public benefits that would be provided, hence the positive climate assessment. And then lastly, OLO found that it could not determine the racial equity and social justice impact statement without more information, but they did note the increase in affordable housing. And with that, I will defer to planning to work through some of how we got here, the collaboration and what the project was and what the old system looked like.
Yeah, before that, just if you could go through, I think that would be helpful just as an update. We had a report on October 11th, 2024. We had 2 work sessions in December and full council briefing, and we introduced this zoning text amendment on April 29th. The public hearing was on June 10th. If we could go through and explain, why we're here. I think it's important that we just take a step back and explain what the public benefits process is. There are some jurisdictions that have a proffer system where you basically negotiate on a case-by-case basis. There are some positives to that system and some real drawbacks to that system. It gives a lot of parochial power to individual politicians, usually. We've tried to remove that from our process. The downside is when you have a countywide program, it doesn't always extract the best community-based benefits, and sometimes there's overlap of the benefits, and sometimes the benefits get outdated and don't necessarily reflect the current county's priorities. So the goal here is to try to get the best of all worlds, to have a system that is much more predictable, is also much fairer and less parochial, but also reflects the needs and the policies and priorities that we have, both community-based, in terms of master plans, but also from a countywide priority basis as well. So with that, let's turn it over to Planning Board Chair, Mr. Sharma, I will allow you all to decide how you want to reflect this, to give some opening comments, and then we'll go through the packet and the decision points that we have before us.
Thank you. Artie Harris, Chair of the Planning Board. We're delighted to be here. We have a lot to go over today, so I'll focus on Mr. Sharma and go through why we are here.
Thank you, Chair Harris. For the record, Atul Sharma, I'm the project manager for this effort. We've been working on this since 2023, so it has been a long, hard work that we're very delighted to be here at this milestone today in front of the PHP. I'm joined here today with Jay Brown and Afan Sheikh. Jay is the managing director of Hyde Brown, our consultant on this effort, and Afan is a director at Hyde Brown as well. I'll talk a little bit more about their expertise in a minute because they really helped us through the process in a very significant way. But to kind of take a step back, this policy applies to 4 zones currently. These zones are CR, CRT, LSC, and EOF, and while these zones cover only 4% of the county's land area, the Planning Board approved almost 37 million square feet of development in these 4 zones between 2010 and 2025. So they are small but mighty, and they're really important to the county's economic development priorities. So really important to focus on them. And the council, recognizing that, put this program on a work program, this project, in 2023. We spent a significant amount of time doing analysis and stakeholder engagement. It took us about 12 to 18 months to do that, from 2023 to the middle of last year, when we came to the Planning Board in the summer, presented our recommendations, which were then, as you noted, Chair Fritzen, were presented to the council in a briefing in the winter. The policy is a groundbreaking, innovative policy. It was one of the first of its time in 2010, and it was, but it has not received a significant update since its founding. So it was a very good sort of groundbreaking policy. Wasn't updated for 15 years because I think it was partially successful in getting development near transit and in employment sectors. One thing I do want to point out is that it was a very intentional decision to make this a menu-based approach. And the reason for that was to ensure that there was transparency and predictability in the development process, so that everybody from the public to the reviewers to the developers and the applicants knew what the menu of public benefits was that was being expected from the optional method of development. How the policy generally works is that applicants get to build to a higher density near transit or in employment clusters under the optional method of development in return for providing public benefits. So you can do a little bit of development in the standard method, or you can go all the way up to your mapped FAR. But if you go all the way up to your mapped FAR, you have to provide public benefits. That's kind of the underlying sort of mechanism how this policy works. Having said that, I do want to mention that even standard method projects have to do a lot to get a building permit in the county. They have to follow many regulations per the county code, different parts of the county code, and these collectively we have called code requisites in the staff reports and things of that nature. These include things like the forest conservation law, the growth and infrastructure policy, master plan conformance, historic preservation, our Chapter 25A MPDU laws, and agency approvals from many other county agencies, including DOT, DPS, et cetera. So in terms of the analysis we did, I just want to sort of provide a quick recap of that and who we sort of worked with to come up with the recommendations. So we conducted a lot of data collection and analysis because we wanted to make sure that our recommendations were grounded in facts. So this is where we coordinated very closely with Hyde Brown. Hyde Brown is a small minority and woman-owned national advisory and engineering firm based in the District of Columbia, with a couple more offices in different parts of the country. And what is really unique about this firm is that they not only do the math and crunch the numbers of performers, but they also have an engineering and a construction arm. So they really know how that performer translates into bricks and mortar coming out of the ground. And that was really useful for us because they used that whole 180-degree understanding of development projects and helped inform us with the right sort of considerations as we came up with the recommendations that are in the ZTA. In terms of the analysis that we conducted, we looked at all 15 years of the policy, all the projects that were approved under this policy, what public benefits were delivered. We collected all that information, analyzed it, and put that on a data hub, which has publicly been accessible since the beginning of the project. Hyatt Brown then helped us estimate the cost of all the public benefits that are in the current menu, so all 37. They also helped us understand the financial feasibility of including these public benefits into development projects, so making sure that there is a reasonable sort of idea of proportionality between the density that is being given to a project and the public benefits that are being expected in return of that project. And to do that, they did a couple of really important things that I'd like to point out. One, they estimated the costs of all the existing benefits. Then they also estimated the average cost of all the benefits that are being proposed in this menu. We, along with Hyatt Brown, developed 6 different development prototypes that were representative of the different types of projects we see in the county in these 4 zones. So that includes everything from a high-density, high-rise concrete building in a place like Bethesda or Silver Spring to a mid-rise mixed-use apartment building in a place like White Oak or Rock Spring to townhouses and 2-over-2s in some of the more suburban parts of the county, and as well as life science development. Hyatt Brown then took those development prototypes and modeled the new benefits in those based on those. So they were able to then tell us, okay, you're asking for too little or you're asking for too much in these benefits, and we entered into like a back and forth iterative process where the recommendations that we were coming up with were fine-tuned based on that idea of cost and feasibility, because we wanted to make sure that we were getting good and impactful public benefits in return of this optional method density, but at the same time, we're not putting things in the menu that would make projects completely unfeasible. So Hyatt Brown really helped us with that back and forth and fine-tuned and calibrated the public benefits. And the one thing to note here, and Jay, maybe you want to say a couple of things at this point too, is that the whole menu has been calibrated to be one sort of thing. It's not as if we could take one public benefit and sort of ratchet it up or ratchet it down, and it should not be considered as such. We really looked at the whole menu, the 4 tiers that are in the menu, to make sure that there was some sort of equivalency between the different tiers across the various public benefits, because one of the things we learned was that even though we have a huge menu right now, projects are delivering the same 4 or 5 public benefits over and over again because it's the easier and cheaper way to do. So we wanted to make sure if we have a slimmer menu, which we do, a much shorter menu, that there is equivalency at the different tiers. So tier 1 across various public benefits should have a similar level of cost and investment associated, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4.
Sure.
Just Jay Brown, Chairman and Managing Director at Hyatt Brown, and just let me say it was a delight working with the team on this project. It was really, in our view, groundbreaking to take a system that had been around for as long as it had and really hadn't, to use your words, to calibrated feasibility with benefits and to work with the team in this sort of iterative way to not only make sure that the benefits reflected the priorities that the county has, but then make sure those benefits blended well with what the development community can afford to do to make good on those promises. And so we feel like we ultimately ended up with the right calibration, which you said earlier, like if you're going to have a menu system, it needs to have enough rigor to it so that you can feel confident that you're getting value for what you're contributing in terms of density, but at the same time be clear and transparent so that the development community could know what they were getting into. So we feel like the system, the 4 tiers, the benefits that are included, the 13 benefits, and the way they all interact with each other really reaches that goal in the best way that we could, and in the most objective way as we could. The costs we tried to look at the costs very objectively, and we put our developer hats on and created models to estimate feasibility in as objective a way as possible. but one that was grounded in market realities. So that's why it is kind of a system that fits together now, as opposed to, a menu of things that you can just sort of move around.
We just have a couple more things to point out, and then I think we'll sort of turn it back to Ms. Nadeau. We also did look nationally at other jurisdictions to understand what they were doing to compare ourselves to that and learn from their best practices. So Hyde Brown helped us look at Austin, Detroit, and Seattle's models for incentive density. Regionally, we are constantly compared to regional jurisdictions. So we actually looked at Arlington, Fairfax County, and Washington, D.C. with a focus on how they regulate incentive density. This included looking at their projects, their 4.1 process, their PUD process, calling up planners in those organizations to understand how they go about doing this so that we could learn from that as well. And the last thing I would note is that we did a lot of engagement with different stakeholders along the way. So we had an internal working group that included regulatory staff from the planning and parks teams that uses this policy on a daily basis. But more importantly, we had a technical working group that included developers, design professionals, land use attorneys, real estate experts, engineers, as well as many colleagues from county agencies, including DPS, DHCA, DOT, the Office of Agriculture, as well as representatives from the county executive's office and council staff. So this group, we took our key findings of our analysis to this group. We took our draft recommendations to this group. They actually gave us great feedback, and we sort of tried to incorporate that into the recommendations that ended up in the ZTA in front of you. And their input has really made the project a lot better. We also sort of did a deeper dive coordination with specific agencies where a particular public benefit was really relevant to their work. So, for example, all the green energy and the sustainable site development public benefits, we coordinated directly with the team at DPS that manages our BEPS and our green construction code updates, so really trying to stay in track with them. All our housing-related benefits were discussed in collaboration with DHCA and their staff. Off-site improvements and public facilities, we talked to staff at DOT. So really tried to sort of make sure we understood their perspective while creating these recommendations. And then we had a series of open houses and small group discussions with advocacy groups, regional service centers, minority group representatives, to see how this would impact those groups and what we could do to sort of further their interests and in this policy. And at the end of the day, I think we really tried to create a program, a policy update that is simple and clear, one that maintains proportionality between the intensity of development and the expectation for public benefits, and one that is flexible to meet the changing needs of the county. We are in the state of flux right now at every level of the development process, so we want to make sure we have a policy that is flexible. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ms. Nadeau and just say that it's been really helpful for us to have guidance from council staff, and Bilal in particular has been sort of on both sides of this table, so we really appreciate all the help that we've received through the process.
Great. Well, appreciate the collaboration and look forward to working our way through the packet. So why don't we turn it to Ms. Nadeau, and we just got an overarching summary of what is included and what we're looking to change, and we can go through and work through the packet. So
Sounds good.
back to you.
So thank you for that planning. So that actually covers pages about 3 through 6 of the staff report. So thank you. So if you go to the bottom of page 6, that's where we start with updates to the new system. Although for reference, if you go, I think, to pages 4 and 5, you'll see the list of the many public benefits we used to have, which, as you'll note, are reflected in this new system, but more streamlined. So after all of this analysis, the planning board made recommendations to update the system. These are at the top of page 7, and because we're going to go through each of them, I'm not going to go through them one at a time here. I will note, because I was asked this question in a meeting last week, I know the CTA is very long, and it can be very scary when they're very long. I think this one is 70 pages. So as you know, brackets are things coming out, underline is things going in. The reason I explain that is the way this CTA worked is in the beginning, there's lots of tweaks to just the employment zone section, the commercial residential zone section, and then you get to the meat of the ZTA, which is the whole new system. So that's kind of an underlined section in the middle of the ZTA. But then you get to the end of the ZTA and there's like 20 more pages of underlined text. And what I want to explain here is none of that is new. That's the way in legislative drafting that we took the entire old system and just moved it to the end, which means you bracket it out in the beginning and then underline it later. So while the ZTA seems very scary and long, the truth is that's just how legislative drafting is. So it's only that middle section that's a lot of the new stuff. So with that caveat, so the first major change in the ZTA is defining incentive density, because that term was not actually in the zoning ordinance before, and that is the difference in density between the maximum allowed under the standard method development and the mapped FAR. As noted by planning, this is important because incentive density is just getting you up to what your mapped FAR is, as this committee often talks about when working through master plans. So they're not going above the FAR that was allowed in the original zoning. Next are revisions to the development standards in the commercial and residential zones. This is a lot of sort of just cleanup tweaks. So first, the term major public facility is replaced with tier 4 public benefit under certain categories. In addition, there's language switching out the term public benefit points for incentive density. So this is just covering some of those early pages of the ZTA, that it's just replacing current terms in the zoning ordinance with language that more accurately reflects the new system. So those are the changes being made to the commercial residential sections and the employment zone section. So I wanted to do those up front. I will note, I think the staff report when I was prepping today, I guess I forgot I had done this. It actually goes through things in the order they appear in the ZTA. So if you're somebody who likes to follow along line by line with the text, this should actually work pretty well. The next major recommendation from planning here was lowering the optional method development threshold in the CRT zone. So this is at the top of page 8 in the staff report. So the CRT zone is intended to be a less intense version of the CR zone in terms of density and uses. But what was seen through the study was that there's actually a lot of significant projects in this zone, and the FAR can range from 0.25 to 4.75. And because the threshold for optional method was higher, there were a lot of large projects in the CRT zone that could still be built below 1 FAR, but didn't have to provide public benefits. So one major recommendation that's in the ZTA is to lower the threshold for optional method development in the CRT zone from 1 FAR to 0.5 FAR. We did receive a letter requesting an amendment grandfathering projects that already have an approval, and that I will address later in this work session when we get to the amendment section, but I'm flagging it here because that's to amend this specific language to just grandfather it in.
Yeah, let's take it up where you brought it up later in the packet, but this is significant. This is probably the most impactful to the community and most impactful to the property owners and applicants. This lowers the threshold, and the challenge of that and the pushback to a certain extent is that it makes it harder to build those projects between 0.5 and 1 FAR. On the beneficial side, there are a lot of projects in CRT zones that are below 1.0 FAR that will now receive a greater level of public benefits, which is the goal here. And in fact, the CRT zones in many cases are closer to residential neighborhoods and communities. And so the impact of those public benefits to those neighborhoods and communities could be more significant in those cases. So that's the balance that we heard earlier, the back and forth between all the various stakeholders that planning and the consultant tried very hard to work through. But this is kind of center of that discussion, negotiation, and question. But I think we'll take it up, the suggestion to the feedback received that council staff has. But I just wanted to highlight that. I think this is a major benefit to the community in the sense that it lowers the threshold, but working through that and making sure that it's reasonable is important.
Okay, so next is a requirement for applicants to purchase or make payment to the Agricultural Land Preservation Fund, ALPF, either BLTs, which is the Building Lot Termination Program, or an equivalent dollar amount of TDRs, our transfer development rights. I do have a kind of lengthy footnote here at the bottom. I am not with this committee going to go through the details of what those programs are, but if there are any questions, please ask. But for the optional method, currently, optional method requires the purchase of BLTs in the CR and the LSC zones. And TDRs are included as an optional public benefit on the prior menu, but they're not a mandatory requirement. So of course, as you might guess, what happens is we have the BLTs being provided and we're not getting those TDRs. And as this committee knows, there's been a lot of talk and discussion about those programs and how to make them better. So this is one of the solutions. Based on the committee's discussion in December, the ZTA is going to require an applicant to purchase or make a payment to the ALPF, either BLTs or an equivalent dollar amount of TDRs based on the incentive density floor area. That payment, the amount will be determined in regulations from the Office of Agriculture, who are here as well if there are any questions, and be updated by the Office of Ag as well through regulation. The language that was written by council staff, planning in the Office of Agriculture, we worked together, and that language is at the top of page 9. You will see it's actually very similar to the existing BLT language, except it adds the piece about TDRs and also adds that ALPF can manage those payments now.
Appreciate it. Did you want any comments from the Office of Agriculture or consistent with the discussions? All right, nothing to add from the Office of Agriculture. They're nodding their heads in the back that they were part of the conversation and discussion. Anything to add from planning on this? Okay, anything from colleagues? All right, let's continue.
So next is removing optional method development for the LSC and EOF zones. This is another big one. The study revealed that optional method generally occurs in the CR, CRT, LSC and EOF zones, primarily occurs in the CR and CRT zones. That in EOF and LSC, it's very specific type of development, that's our life sciences and our employment zones, and there's just different considerations there. Analysis showed that 80% of properties in the EOF zone don't even have a sufficient FAR to trigger optional method, and then much of the LSC zoned property is now under the Great Seneca Life Sciences Overlay Zone, which this committee reviewed, I think it was early this year. And so with those two considerations, ZTA 2505 removes LSC and EOF from optional method. There are some LSC properties that are not in the GSLS overlay zone, but there's only 3 of those, so that would be the impact there, and I believe they're not expected to be developed in the near future. But to sort of compensate for that, there is going to be a site plan requirement above 0.5 FAR for those projects to make sure that even though they're no longer under optional method, they're still going to get site plan review. So that's the major change to those 2 zones being made here. And I will pause there if there's any questions.
All right, so adding in site plan review.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue.
Okay. And then second, another piece of this is there was existing language in that optional method section about additional height for biohealth. So that language will move from the optional method development section to the density and height section, which in retrospect, it probably made more sense in that section. Anyways, the next point here is something the committee had asked to raise based on that work session on ZTA 2403, which was the GSLS overlay zone discussion. So as a bit of a recap, because I know it was a little while ago. So at that committee session, it was a 2-to-1 vote recommending not carrying over a provision that exempted hospitals from providing BLTs. This is something that Adventist Hospital had requested. And what happened in the discussion basically was they were being required to provide these BLTs and arguing that they had a 0% requirement Planning had discussed that the intent of the requirement, the 7.5, which is a number that came from the existing BLT language, was used in all of their modeling, and they were trying to be fair to development across the zone. And the committee agreed with that, but we did note that this incentive density project was coming up, and so you might want to revisit it. So that is now. But upon further review, it turned out that there will be no hospitals outside of the GSLS overlay zone. Yep. So there's nowhere this would apply, or therefore BLTs would be required. Only one site is Zone CR, and it's the now closed hospital in Tacoma Park. The remaining hospitals are in that LSC zone. So we'll go under the prior to one committee recommendation. And then there are others in a residential or CRN zone. And as noted, CRN is coming out of optional method. So the issue is moot unless the committee wants to revisit the vote on Adventist. I will note here, if the committee does want to do that, we are going to have to do a cleanup ZTA if this CTA passes. The approach for this, because it was a lot to digest, is you will notice none of the overlay zones are in ZTA 2505. The idea is once we have the system in place, council staff and planning staff will work to draft a ZTA that applies this new system to the existing overlay zones, and really going through each zone to make sure we do that transition correctly. So any future changes could be in that future ZTA.
Effectively, we're handling this like a sector plan or a
Yeah.
master plan, where we're making the policy changes through this vehicle, and then we're going to come back and implement the policy changes in a comprehensive way. I think that's a much more methodical way to handle it, and I think it's a good suggestion from our legislative attorney. Councilmember Geronda.
Thank you. I appreciate the recap, and that was really clear, and I remember the discussion. Just so I'm 100%, you're saying unless you'd want to revisit on the one that's no longer serving as a hospital?
No, sorry, be revisiting the Adventist hospital that's in the Great Seneca.
Shady Grove, right, okay, got it, okay. Yeah, that's going to be housing or whatever. Three of the four, my kids were born at that old one, but it's funny enough, so it has a special place in my heart. So just explain, so then functionally, so the 2-1 will hold for that hospital.
Yes.
They will pay the BLT
Yes.
At the previous discussed rate, like as we did before. So, and if we wanted to, I'm just looking, I know the majority of the committee doesn't, but I'm just thinking about forward. So the objection that I had was that they previously had not had to pay it. Now they will have to pay it. Mm-hmm. But it's just this, and now it's just this one hospital.
It's just the one, yeah. And that was part of the reason why we wanted to take time to look at how many other hospitals there were. Because one of the issues at the time is, are they being treated than other hospitals? And I guess the answer is no, because they were the only one based on current development on the ground now and where they are all zoned with this new incentive density update.
Right. So even though they're still the only one paying it, that they're the only one in the zone that they would have to pay it.
Right.
Have we had any additional feedback from them since the initial discussion or conversation?
Neither planning nor council staff has heard from them since.
Okay. No. Okay. All right. Well, I just want to note, I think when we get to full council, I will reach out personally, but I think it'd be helpful to, now that we know no others are impacted, it's just them, just what it's going to mean for them. I talked about at the time the cost of understanding needing to provide funding to the BLTs, but the fact that they were exempted before, this is a change to having them. We're talking about one entity that provides a very important service and is struggling with a lot of different issues financially. So it's a weighing of all these things, like what are we weighing here? And I get the reason planning just wants to have it be consistent, but I also am sensitive to the concerns raised by the hospital. So I just want to, if we could make sure it gets moved on, and I will do my research and talk to them and see what the impact is, and if we can maybe have that included as we go to full council at some point.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Could I just make a suggestion? I'm a Holy Cross kid, but
Yeah.
no judgments across the board. All great healthcare institutions we're very lucky to have in Montgomery County. My only suggestion is we can include this as a footnote, but it's really not a decision point for this zoning text amendment. It would be an overlay zone question when we come back. So there is time to, allow us to do that. And my suggestion would be that we do some more work. We talk with the stakeholders. We have a, conversation with colleagues. And when we come back with the overlay zone, we can take this up really in earnest. So, perhaps a brief footnote. I don't want to get too caught up in this at full council because it's really not a decision point for this item. But we should have a robust discussion on it, and it should be part of the discussion. And we can determine whether we want to revisit it. And I think my view at the time was it was premature to eliminate it at that point because we hadn't made some of these decisions. It could be worthwhile and reasonable for us to take a look at that, but I think we need to do that at the overlay zone standpoint. And my bigger concern is that we address the broader issue of BLTs and TDRs through this
I'm fine with that.
program, which we did. So I just suggest brief, footnote. Here's the decision point for a later day related to the overlay zone implementation. That discussion is forthcoming, and we not get into a debate and discussion about an item that isn't before us at full council. That would be my only suggestion. But appreciate it, and part of the ongoing discussions where you pull the thread here at this committee on one item, and there are many other threads of other dynamics that are impacted. So I appreciate colleagues and Councilmember Jawanda for raising it, and the thoughtful overview of how we got to this point in the packet. So I don't think there's a discussion point. I think it's moot before us right now, and there could be an opportunity to discuss and revisit it as part of the overlay zone related to the Great Seneca plan and the overlay zone there when we come back.
Yeah, that idea makes sense to me. I will do that.
Perfect. Great. Let's continue.
Strangely, this far into the game, I'm now going to actually talk about the new public benefit system. So the first step is it's divided into 4 big categories. There are 2 that fall under countywide priorities. That's housing for all and environmental resilience. And then 2 that fall into local needs per master sector plans. That's infrastructure for compact growth and complete community amenities. And that diagram is at the bottom of page 10. So what will happen under the new system is an applicant will have to provide public benefits, at least 1 from countywide priorities and at least 1 from local needs from applicable master plans, unless they provide a tier 4 public benefit, because those are very intense, expensive benefits, or if they're only requesting 0.25 FAR or less of incentive density. And then when you go to each public benefit, there are 13 that you'll see at a diagram at the top of page 12. There will be tiers. So there's 4 different tiers. Tier 1 gets you 0.25 FAR, Tier 2, 1 FAR, Tier 3, 1.5 FAR, and Tier 4 will satisfy all of the requested incentive density. And of course, the intensity of the benefit will increase with each tier. So the example I used in the staff report is if you underground all your existing overhead utilities, something I know we talk about a lot and that we all want. If you do that, that will satisfy your public benefits. But in that same category, if you just underground existing transformers and utility boxes, that's a tier 1 benefit. As noted by planning, I think really important here is it is a menu, so you have to pick 1 from the 2 categories that are countywide and then 1 from the 2 that are more local, but within those you can build however you want. So you could do a tier 3 and a tier 1, and all of what you choose will just depend on how much incentive density you're requesting. So it's providing a lot of flexibility to developers. I mentioned that because we got a lot of letters about specific public benefits. Is this too high? Is this too low? And the response is, you can just not pick that one. So, because it is a large menu.
Entree, you get an appetizer. You don't have to pick that entree. You don't have to pick that appetizer. You can choose the one that makes sense to you, but you have to pick one
You have to pick
in
something.
each. Yeah.
Also, if you have an application with a tract size that is under 1 acre, but you have an FAR greater than 4, that's a large FAR for a small lot, and usually that's because these are our small parcels, they're downtown, they're near transit, and they usually have more height. For those projects, the trigger is going to be at a different point. So in other words, we'll require public benefits for density above 2 FAR instead of above 0.5 FAR. And that's for feasibility reasons, that if you required over 0.5, they'd have to provide a lot to get from 0.5 to 4. And that was not in the intent as we had mapped them. So that's the small parcel discussion.
Okay.
All right, so next is the figure. I will note that I did steal this figure from planning, and it was before we drafted the ZTA, and one of the categories split. And environmental resilience is now energy efficiency and renewable energy, and then street grid and trail extensions was renamed to street grid and multimodal extensions. So from pages, and I will defer to the committee how you want to do this, 12 through 13, I just listed every public benefit, and what I tried to do after each dash is explain how that public benefit works. So for example, family-sized units are dwellings with 3 or more bedrooms, and the tiers go up based on the percentage of MPDUs. So that's what those explanations are. I'm going to assume you don't want me to read through all of them, but I wanted to do a sort of compressed version. So if you're like, well, what does that public benefit means? So for example, you'd say, what does green buildings mean? What do I have to do for that? It's meet or exceed the alternative compliance path or an alternative certification program. And again, based on the tiers, that's how much you'd have to provide for however much FAR you're asking for.
I think that works. I think it's helpful to have it all here so everybody can see it. I don't think we have to read verbatim everything that's in the packet.
Right.
It's important that it's in the packet, and for those who are watching, you can go through and see how each one is laid out and an explanation of it.
One thing I do want to note here, because I think this was in the county executive's letter, obviously 4 categories is both a lot and very few. It's housing, which is important, environment is important, transportation is important, everything is very important. That's why the 4 categories. I know there's been some feedback on why don't you require housing and environment and make the others optional, or require housing and make everything else optional. And the answer for that was just in developing it, they were trying to find a balance, as you heard from Hyatt Brown, about getting a bit of everything that we're requesting from developers. And I want to note here that all our housing requirements still exist. So this is just for the incentive density. You still have to do your 12.5 or 15% MPDU, and this would all be on top of that. But that's just a explanation of why it was drafted that way, where you're picking from categories instead of requiring one and making the rest optional, because it was all about achieving a balance. With, of course, additional feasibility analysis. So I'll pause there.
Good.
Okay. Similarly, existing still is, oh, sorry, yes.
I will ask just one question for the millions watching at home, and if there's just one, and just maybe you could use this as an example. So like in the housing category, MPDUs provides more than the minimum MPDUs required by the county or the applicable master plan, right? So that's either going to be more than 12.5 or more than 15, depending on where you are. More being, there's no further definition than that, correct? Or is there?
There is, and
Okay, yes, great. So explain what that is and what that looks like. I think it should be nice to walk through. That's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
Line 804, if that helps at all.
Yep, line 804, page 34 of your packet breaks out the MPDU incentive density thresholds by tiers. So let's say the minimum requirement is, let's pick a number, 12.5% by the county law. If a master plan, if a project wants to earn.
Page of the ZTA are you on?
It's page 34
34.
of the ZTA.
ZTA, thank you.
Line 804.
Got it. Oh, yes, thank you. I got it.
So under the MPDUs, there are 4 levels of participation. So if the requirement is 12.5%, and you provide 15% MPDUs, you'll get incentive density approval of 1.25 FAR. If you increase that commitment to provide 5% more, so in that case, this would be 17.5%, you would get 1.5 FAR. If you go one step further up the ladder and do 7.5% more, so at this point you're at 20% MPDUs, you would get incentive density of 1.75 FAR. And if you go more than 10%, which would be a project delivering 22.5% or 25% MPDUs, depending on what the base requirement is, that would be considered a Tier 4 public benefit, in which case you would not have to provide other public benefits, and you would be able to build up to your mapped FAR by providing that significant
Just
public
through that alone.
just through that alone. But that,
You basically ran us through the tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just
so each of the 14 public benefits has a description of the threshold for each of the 4 tiers.
And could you talk a little bit about maybe Mr. Brown, about, or whoever, about how you settled on, like, what was the back room, the show your work on why you think this is a reasonable balancing based on this incentive?
Sure, yeah. So that modeling that I was talking about earlier, when we were trying to figure out where those thresholds were for each of the tiers, we were modeling, well, what impact does an additional X amount of FAR have, at this level, and really trying to make sure that at each change in the threshold, or at the upper end of each threshold, we were staying within a feasible project, but maximizing the amount of MPDUs you could get from that. So looking at the cost compared to what impact it would have on financial feasibility, and again, it's not an exact science, but it was pretty rigorous, and we went back and forth until we found tiers and FAR that seemed to be calibrated, appropriately, in terms of, again, achieving the MPDUs you want, but allowing enough value so that developers were incentivized to actually provide those MPDUs. So it was a lot of back and forth, tweaking our modeling and to get to thresholds that we thought made sense.
And this would be at the current MPDU affordability guidelines as far as AMI, correct?
This particular benefit, yes, but there are other benefits. There's another separate public benefit called deeper levels of affordability on page 35 and 36, which incentivizes projects that might provide a deeper level of affordability through the provision of their MPDUs. And this is something that DHCA really helped us kind of think through and come up with the right numbers. And the MPDU example is actually a perfect example to shed light on your question, Councilmember Givando. You'll notice that the Tier 1 in MPDUs is higher than others, right? So it doesn't start at 0.25, it starts at 1.25. And that is in recognition of the fact that MPDUs are, in fact, one of the most costliest public benefits to provide. So we really try to be very sensitive to how much we can get and how much it's going to cost, and try to marry the two in a reasonable way, as Jay just sort of shared.
I appreciate that. I mean, one of the comments that we saw, I think, in the letter from the county executive was that they're going through this process now, and it'll come to this committee eventually, of looking at all these programs, the MPDU program, the workforce housing program, and potentially making some adjustments with the deeper levels of affordability and range of affordability in mind. Just note that, obviously it's not before us now, but that could, if there are changes made there, that would obviously impact, and we'd probably want to come back and take a look on this point, on these, just to make sure that we're aligned and that we agree. But I appreciate the effort that went into this, and I think if I was going to pull out one example of the many, this is one that I think the public would be interested in, and want to know that, make sure that we don't know how these are going to, some of these are kind of new, and so we don't know what people are going to take advantage of, but we can, I push family size units a lot. Some things we did have or have not helped and incentivize that. So I think it's a good effort to try to hone in on them and get more of what we want. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate that, and I think the MPDU as the standard for the Tier 1 through 4, but then the separate deeper levels of affordability, I think separating those two out give us a little bit of that flexibility, which I think is really important and really helpful, and I appreciate us fleshing that out, but I think there is an opportunity for us to do that. So thank you for raising it, and I agree that this is of critical importance, I think, to all of us, to the community. We all recognize that there is an affordability crisis that we have, and the question is, what are we going to do about it? Let's continue.
And I will note also that I know DHCA is working on that update, and there will definitely need to be a ZTA after, because we reference that chapter a lot in the zoning ordinance. So we'll make sure that we go through this at that time as well.
Right. Not just here, but throughout
the whole zoning ordinance. And then in addition to the Chapter 25A, that's the MPU chapter, requirements, all the growth and infrastructure policy, the water supply sewage system plan, all our existing water, sewer, stormwater management requirements, all of that is the base level, and everything in incentive density would be above that to address some of the other categories outside of housing. So next, at the top of page 14, the ZTA also allows payment in lieu for certain public benefit categories. That's off-site improvements, public facilities, street grid and multimodal extensions, art and placemaking, and great public realm. The reason why it's only for a few is the payment in lieu will require the master plan for wherever the project is recommends large-scale facilities or amenities, and that there's a CIP project that can utilize the payment, and that the public benefit be off-site. This is where it makes the most sense to have a payment in lieu, because we know that payment will still go to a project in that area, but it will also help our CIP program. I will make a quick plug here that we are still working, I promise, on the infrastructure funding work group, because I know when we bring up CIP, people often ask that. It is starting soon, I promise. And then a separate note, because I think this was raised in one of the county executive letters as well, the payment in lieu rates are based on the Baltimore Construction Cost Index. The reason that one is chosen, I know there's a lot of different construction cost indexes, but the Baltimore one we also use for the Bethesda Overlay Zone Park Impact Payment, the Silver Spring Community Improvement Fund, and for transportation impact tax rates, so it's easier to be uniform across the board is the reason why that was chosen.
Yeah, I think it's important to be consistent here. So let's continue.
Next, the ZTA gives the planning board flexibility by allowing an alternative method of compliance for providing a public benefit. The board has certain somewhat strict standards to apply here. It has to be a unique site, use characteristic, or a unique benefit to the public, or there's a constraint that precludes delivery of a predefined public benefit. This is actually language that's very similar to our variance standards. So an applicant can't just get out of providing public benefits by using this method. They'd have to go to the planning board and argue why they really can't provide these public benefits on their specific site.
I just want to note, we received quite a bit of stakeholder feedback requesting this, and just want to reiterate that it's included, that there is an alternative compliance mechanism, and it's consistent with other alternative compliance standards that we have for variances and others. So let's continue.
And then additionally, there's an alternative compliance path for green buildings, which is also alternative compliance, but slightly different than the prior one. And that's through LEED. The reason LEED was chosen here is that's a very established green building certification program. It's used across the region, and it's also used by DPS in their green construction code requirements. So that is the new system, and the rest are certain specifics that go along with the system that I'll go through. First, as noted, going back to the MPDUs, as you know, the council recently passed Bill 225, which for an applicant that provides at least 17.5% MPDUs, I should have noted in here for doing an office conversion, that part is important, they receive a 20-year property tax abatement. The way it's written in the ZTA, it's MPDUs make an applicant eligible for MPDUs that are not required by the county. Council staff's reading, and I believe the county attorney's office and finance read this as well, is that the MPDUs for the pilot are not required by the county. It's Chapter 25A, that is. So for applicants who are taking advantage of the pilot, given what you just heard about the tiers, they will likely just automatically satisfy Tier 1 and Tier 2. And I just wanted to flag that because I knew there'd eventually be questions about that from stakeholders. That the pilot, you don't, for incentive density, you won't have to go above the 17.5. The issue there being if they're going to do 17.5% MPDUs, they have to have the density to do it. So you want them to be able to get up to that mapped FAR by providing these other public benefits as well, if that makes sense.
George Rondo.
So you're eligible for the 20-year tax abatement, and it's the consideration of you would also automatically qualify for satisfy the tier 1 or tier 2, and then qualify for the incentive density as well.
Yes.
What you said.
Yes.
The other way you could look at it is that you'd have to go above the 17.5%, because that's what you're getting the property tax abatement as a benefit because you're doing that. And you're saying your reading of it is not that that's required.
Correct. My reading is
One
that
benefit gets you two.
right, that
one
it's
thing.
required for the pilot, but not required as the MPDU requirement for 25A. So if you want an applicant to not start getting incentive density, if they meet the pilot, you'd have to do an amendment to clarify that if you are already doing the 17.5 to get, let's say tier 1 is that 2.5 extra, rather than, as Mr. Sharma explaining, having to do 17.5, they'd have to do 19.5. And then the question there would be, would they still be able to get to their mapped and then provide those affordable units? So that's the balance there. But yes, you would need an amendment if you want them to start at the 17.5 instead of what's in Chapter 25.
Well, that would be my preference. I think, that's a huge benefit that was in 225 that I think was, while not the core issue today, is related. I think one of the things that we haven't done a great job of is the layering of multiple benefits and understanding the aggregate nature of them. Similarly, I think we haven't done a great job of understanding the potential requirements either, and just kind of looking at it all in one place. But so I think I don't know what we're doing as far as process. I know this is a work session today, but I would prefer to start it, consider that as something that's already required and start from there. And anything above that to get this additional incentive would require more affordability.
Let's hear from planning.
Thank you. And yes, this is definitely a question worth discussing at this time. I think maybe what would be helpful is have Jay talk a little bit about what they see as the overall kind of development cost to do the types of projects that the bill is requiring in terms of conversions, and then what does it mean when you layer in the MPDU affordability at either above 15% or above 17.5%, because I do think that does have a significant sort of shift in the cost of the project. The one thing I will note is, even regardless of how this sort of discussion goes, let's say if you keep it as is written out in the staff report, and you do allow a project that is doing 17.5% MPDUs to qualify for incentive density, if the base requirement is 15%, which it is in most parts of the county where this is being discussed, that project would essentially earn the right to build 1.25 FAR of its overall density. So it's unlikely to us that you would see projects that are just building up to 1.25 FAR and taking use of the pilot. So they would still have to provide additional public benefits, whether in housing or in something else, to get up to their mapped FAR. Typically, the mapped FAR for these types of projects is in the 3 to 4 range. On the smaller sites, it's even higher because the footprint is so limited. But I did want to have Jay talk a little bit about just compare this to other places, compare this to the region, just for context for your consideration.
Sure, thank you. Like Mr. Sharma said earlier, we're the number crunchers. We have not crunched these numbers yet, but in hearing about this and sort of looking at it in the context of what we're proposing here, I think the way that we would sort of think about it is that it is very challenging right now to repurpose an office building into housing, and the places where it's happening, it's requiring a decent amount of subsidy from jurisdictions that are doing that. So the current program that that we're proposing and that the staff is recommending for the MPDUs is looking at that as a kind of a clean development without all the burden of having to structure an office building into. So just on a sort of apples to apples basis, you are adding a significant cost to the project that probably needs some sort of subsidy like the tax abatement to make that happen. Just because you're going from office to residential. We haven't done the numbers yet to see exactly how much tax abatement is needed to fill that subsidy gap, but intuitively, it is not the same as just a normal multifamily development project that you're trying to incentivize for MPDUs. And so, we're seeing these office conversions is just everywhere are very difficult. Not a lot of jurisdictions are able to do it effectively. And so, I would say, we'd want to do the numbers to give you, actual numbers that tell you whether there's any excess capacity for more affordability or deeper affordability with the tax abatement. But it definitely adds more cost that has to be that will impact the feasibility of the project without some additional subsidy like a tax abatement.
Right, and I think that's the whole game is what's the delta. I mean, no one has argued, myself included, that there isn't additional cost in conversion of office building to residential. The question is what is required, and weighing that against what the benefit is, and then do you have extra capacity to get more affordable? It's the whole balancing act. It's the whole game. So I would love for you to partake in that analysis. I think there was some analysis done by some of our finance team. There's been some analysis around what the cost of the property tax abatement could be for a normal, like you said, clean building, and what that could potentially benefit be, as far as a dollar and cents. And, I would love for some independent analysis of looking at that and whether it makes sense. I also take your point of, like, if they're going to do it based on the size, they probably would do the higher tiers. I think I heard you say they would, or I want to make sure I understood what you say, higher FAR.
Yeah, not higher than 1.25.
Right. So, I mean, I would be interested in seeing that just to decide whether this makes sense.
Could I make a suggestion? So I think we should move forward with this. I think this is an item that could be a discussion at full council. I think we can keep it as it is. We introduce it together. I think if planning could come back with some of the numbers crunching that was requested, and the scenarios and the issue that you raised of the likelihood of 1.25 FAR for some of these projects, and give us a case study or some type of backup to that statement and belief. I think we can come back. We can note that this was a discussion. We can take a formal vote now. I'm not sure we need to unless there's desire among colleagues, and then come back and raise this as a discussion point during full council and raise this with the additional input from planning. The current interpretation of what has been introduced is that the 17.5% would satisfy tier 1 and tier 2. The question is, what does that mean? I think is what planning is raising, not just the cost of requiring more to satisfy benefits just to meet your mapped density. This is not getting additional density. This is getting to your mapped density, which I think is important to note. But also the feasibility and likelihood of 1.25 FAR, which is what would be satisfied, being something that would make much or any of these projects viable to begin with. I think that's a helpful point. So I just, if we can have a discussion, further discussion. I think that would be most helpful for us personally. But if we want to vote today, we can too if we need to.
No. I mean, I think we introduced this as a committee because I think in general there's a lot of agreement that we need to update the system. At that time, we didn't necessarily know where the numbers were going to land on the abatement. I assumed whatever that landed, if it passed, that it would be on that number. I did not assume that we were going to end up in this interpretation. I thought it would be on top of, because it's two separate incentives, right? One's a property tax abatement, which has a cost benefit to make the projects happen. We can argue about how much is needed or whatever. We did argue about that. That's settled for now. And then this is another potential incentive to get to your mapped FAR based on a public benefit. And so there is, I think common sense dictates that it's another incentive, that you shouldn't get to get one incentive and then qualify for an extra without demonstrating that you need it. I mean, I just think that we should do that exercise. And so I'm fine with the approach, but I do think it's something on top of the previous incentive. I understand the distinction between a clean versus non-clean, but this incentive for the property tax abatement was supposed to deal with this, because it's so generous because it's this type of conversion. This is something separate. So, but if it doesn't actually in the real world work out and no one's going to do, I'm open to have that discussion too. But I think we should go through the exercise. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it as well. It's a legitimate public policy discussion that I think we ought to have, and trying to find an appropriate forum without holding up the broader policy before us, which I know we have broad agreement on. So I'm trying to balance that and be fair to all the views here. I also think it's important, as you come back to us, to note what the unintended consequence could be in terms of townhome versus multifamily development, and what the actual amount of housing that we could generate here. Because one of the challenges that we have in the current environment that we're in, because of the cost of construction and because of the way that rents are we almost guaranteeing certain redevelopment to only make townhome development plausible in certain areas. And that's not an outcome we want either, because we don't achieve the number of housing units, the level of affordability of housing units, or potentially the public benefits that we would otherwise prefer to get if we had a higher density development based on the public benefit system that we're creating, that increases the public benefits by the increase in intensity. And I will note, more housing is a public benefit too. And I just, that's the challenge and the balance. So I would just ask that be part of the consideration and thought as you come back to us. We have that discussion. We'll take it up. When we take this up on this item, we'll pause and have a discussion on this particular item. But I think it's helpful for us not to hold it up, which I know is nobody's interest or intention here, because there is overwhelming agreement on the vast majority of what we're discussing today, nearly all of it.
We'll be happy to do that. If it's okay with the PHP members and council staff, we would request that we can kind of narrow the scope of where we are looking and what are the scenarios we are coming back to you with, for it to be meaningful. Because I think even an adaptive reuse project, the numbers could be significantly different based on where it is in the county and what you're trying to do and what the land costs are and how big the property is. So
I'll yield, if it's okay with colleagues, I will yield to planning and to council staff to work together to come up with what is reasonable and constructive and productive. And I see our council staff in the back and Ms. Nadeau, and we have you here at the table and your broader team who are sitting behind you. I think you all can work together to figure that out. I don't think we're in the best position to tell you what you should show us. I think you all are in the best position to tell us what would be most helpful, constructive, and productive for us to make the best public policy decision. There is a balance here. On the one hand, the double dipping question, and it's a legitimate concern. On the other hand, not wanting to completely undermine the goal, which is to bring things that we need and want to happen to a level playing field. You don't want to set it at a deficit again, and that's a balance that we have to try to reach, or pushing too hard in one direction and having an unintended consequence in another, like not getting the type of density that we want in terms of housing or redevelopment in general and leave blighted properties. So that's the rub, that's the discussion. Reasonable minds can agree and disagree at various points, but I think that if it's okay with colleagues, it seems like we're good on that. And if it's okay with Ms. Nadeau, she will follow up, and we will have council staff join her on that. I see the rest of our housing team in the back is nodding that they're going to help, and our economic team as well. So
I don't know if they're nodding or shaking their head. It's maybe a little both.
Yeah. The bobbleheads go both ways, you know. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, let's continue.
Okay. So next up is the implementation guidelines. This also addresses some of the questions that were raised in letters we received. This is at the top of page 15. So the implementation guidelines, first I will note that they are not subject to council approval. They go to the board. The board, of course, has a public hearing on them, but there is a draft of them attached to this staff report so people can take a look at what they look like so far. And of course, if there's changes made to the ZTA, planning will amend those implementation guidelines, but I wanted to provide them to the council so that they can be looked at as you're thinking about all of this. What they do is they sort of describe the structure and the menu of public benefits. So you'll notice the ZTA has things like providing more of this or a major that. And so what the implementation guidelines do is tell you the definitions of some of the terms, the intent of every public benefit. There'll be examples, there'll be application requirements, and it'll sort of be the guide that all the reviewers will use when deciding if an application has met a certain tier, and also it'll be there for the developers as well to look at when they're choosing among their menu of what to build. So I'm flagging that here because I know there's a lot of questions asking for specific definitions of things. So actually, an example here in the staff report is they talk about energy efficiency, and it tells you which code to use, who in DPS to collaborate with, and additional definitions. So those would be really helpful for implementing this, but are not actually for the council's review.
Great. Anything to add from planning? That seems to sum it up. Let's go. Let's continue.
Next is procedures and exemptions. These are all the grandfathering provisions. So there are three pieces here. The first, and all of it goes by the effective date of the ZTA, which is the day that council votes. So the first piece is any applications for a sketch plan or site plan that are filed and accepted before the effective date of the ZTA will be reviewed under the prior system unless the applicant requests the new system. And then two, the sort of, I believe planning was calling it a crosswalk, is a 12-month window during which an applicant can choose which public benefit system they want to use. The idea here is there might be people already working on their projects who just haven't filed yet, and that 12 months is the window that was determined to be pretty reasonable to give people a chance to still use the prior system. I know there's been discussion back and forth on, I think we got a request for 2 years, we've got a request for 6 months. In the ZTA, it is 12 months. I don't know if you want to defer to planning on how they got to that exact number, but council staff finds it reasonable and has no recommendations to change that at this time. And then lastly, any amendments will, because in the amendment case, your plan's already been approved. If you need to amend it, you can use whatever system you had before, which would be the prior system typically, if it's only a minor change, such as not increasing by more than 10% your density and height. So those are the three pieces of grandfathering that I believe cover all the grandfathering phases, but I wanted to flag this for that 12-month window. This is also why the old system was sort of copy-paste moved to the end, is because for 12 months people can still use it, and also when they do amendments, they need to go back and refer to that old section. It actually has all the things that were grandfathered from the 2014 zoning ordinance, if you'd like some fun reading. So, well, fun's subjective here, but.
It's like the attic. It just builds on itself. Anything to add on the 12 months, or you feel still that that is a reasonable
We support
approach?
the original recommendation.
Okay. Any views? Okay. Seems to be in the middle of what was received as feedback, which seems reasonable. Let's continue.
Okay, so now we are actually on proposed amendments. So this is at the bottom of page 15. The first is actually from the planning board. As you know, when you go through master plans, specific master plans will call out specific public benefits. And in reviewing this after introduction, we realized there wasn't specific language on how a master plan will do that. So that's at the top of page 16, and it just gives planning board that authority. It says a master plan may modify the menu of public benefits as long as it's in compliance with sort of the spirit of the new public benefits system.
Without objection, sounds good. Let's continue.
Next is from written testimony received from NAIOP about site plan review in the EOF zone. As noted earlier, the LSC and EOF zone are being pulled out of optional method, but will have to do site plan review above 0.5 FAR. There's actually a table later in the zoning ordinance that has basically certain things that trigger needing to do site plan review. The request was for the EOF zone, because of the specifics of how that zone works, that instead of triggering site plan at 0.5 FAR, they can trigger site plan at what's in this existing table, and planning and council staff agreed with that amendment, which is at the top of page 17. I will note it leaves the 0.5 FAR for the LSC zone, but as we've noticed, the zones are pretty different, so I think that's still fair.
Without objection, let's continue.
Next is also a request from NAIOP to allow features such as fully protected intersections, new traffic signals, and certain lengths of bikeway to be eligible as Tier 4 benefits. The language here adds an off-site major transportation improvement. Tier 4 is very important because that's the one that can satisfy all your public benefits, and council and planning staff agree with that as well. And a note here that that's a perfect example of the kind of thing that would be defined in the implementation guidelines.
Great. Any comments from planning?
Just one additional comment that, we support this. We think this is a good idea, but I do want to take the opportunity to point out that Tier 4 has to be recommended in the master plan. We want to make sure that these Tier 4 public benefits, especially if we are sort of broadening the palette to include transportation, are things that were identified during the master planning process as really critical needs.
Yeah, you can't just come up with your own transportation priority that you want and fund it and then say that you've satisfied a Tier 4 requirement and have no other public benefit. It has to be what we have agreed as a matter of public policy with significant levels of public input, that this is a major transportation priority. Is that?
Yeah, you would still have flexibility through the alternative compliance. So if there was something that was not imagined at the time of a master plan, but the applicant and the planning board finds sort of conformance with that clause, you could still have.
But it would be up to the discretion of the planning board and would still have to be in conformance with the master plan. It just might not have been recommended because the master plan could be 25 years old and it could be a new emerging state, county transportation priority that comes to fruition.
Yeah.
BRT, for instance, may not be in every master plan, may not have been in every master plan at certain points, but that could have emerged,
Yeah.
Through the iterative process. Now we've gone through and had a comprehensive functional plan, but, okay, I think that's helpful. Any comments? Did you have that? Okay. Councilmember Joanda?
Yeah, just the definition of what a major transportation improvement would be left to either being in the master plan, as we just discussed, or something that you all, I agree, if the application comes in saying we're making a major transportation improvement, you're going to be the arbiter. The planning board would be the arbiter of whether that is worthy. So you have to develop some sort of criteria or standards around that. Is that
Yeah, so that will be in the implementation guidelines, which is nice because it'll be upfront and objective, so it'll be hard for an applicant to later be like, well, actually, because it'll already be locked in. I should have noted the plan for the implementation guidelines is that they get passed pretty soon after the CTA, so there isn't like a big window of arguing.
Yeah, a lobbying.
Yes. I'm sure they'll be lobbied regardless, but.
Not a big window. Okay. Yeah, I think generally it makes, like you said, but I appreciate the statement you said about if we're broadening it, we got to be really clear that this is, because this is the one that allows you to just have one thing and be done with it. So, okay, I'm fine with it.
Great. Without objection,
Without further ado, I think I've teed this one up twice, is the grandfathering the projects in the CRT zone. So this was a letter that was received from Regency Centers, who were developing the Westwood Shopping Center off of West Bard Avenue. So that applicant had obtained preliminary plan, and it had various phases. And the way the ZTA was written, the threshold for CRT, remember, is being lowered from 1 FAR to 0.5 FAR, and then the grandfathering language, if you have sketch plan approval, you can use the same rules. But they do not have sketch plan approval, they have preliminary plan approval. So the request was to find a way to grandfather those projects between 0.5 and 1 FAR, now that CRT will have this additional requirement. In thinking through this one, council and planning staff realized that there actually might be a lot of projects in that window that don't even have preliminary plan approval because they were standard method development. There was some concern that this could delay the implementation of the new public benefit system, but because these are going to be projects that have already been approved, it seems unfair halfway through to make them change the way that they're supposed to be going through, especially if you're adding public benefits they weren't doing before. So there is language at the top of page 18. It is a little long, apologies, and it will read, any development application in process in the CRT zone on or before effective date, including an approved or filed for approval of a concept plan, preliminary plan, site plan, conditional use, local map amendment, record plat, or building permit, which I think covers all the land use applications we do, must be reviewed where the maximum total standard method FAR is the greater of 1 FAR or 10,000 square feet of gross floor area. The approval of any of these applications or amendments must allow the applicant to proceed through any other required application or step in the process within the time allowed by law or plan approval, so there's no extension. And then there's actually a amendment that council staff recommends tweaking this language slightly. It said under the maximum total standard method FAR under section 453A2. It should say under the maximum total standard method FAR at the time of the original approval, so that it's clear that they're using the FAR they had before. So that is the language we came up with, which in some ways is more generous because it includes all the different types of plans, but it is still making them go through whatever they had already had approved.
Yeah, the goal is, we're changing the rules of the game, but we shouldn't change the rules of the game in the middle of the game. I mean, that's not fair. Trying to find that balance, making sure that we're not capturing too much, but capturing what is intended. If you've gone through a formal regulatory process, gotten approvals, and are moving forward, we shouldn't then add on new rules, new requirements, new standards that were not required originally. I think that seems reasonable to me. Councilmember Joanna.
Yeah, my only question, line of questioning would be around, again, this is an incentive benefit if you provide public benefits, right? This and also you listed all of the different stages. The question would be, is there a point in time where presumably along the development process, review process, there is a opportunity to amend or change or switch what your public benefits are or in some way? Does it make sense to use all of them, or is there a point in time where it's when you're this far along, okay, you're kind of locked in, so it doesn't make sense to switch it, as opposed to if you're just in the more earlier stages of development review? Do you get my question? I'm just trying to parse out, because we just listed everything. So if you've done anything, concept plan, you can be grandfathered. I just wonder if there's a better point in which to do it.
No, I'm happy to answer that question. In general, we agree on this recommendation. The one suggestion that I was just sort of shared, I think it's a good suggestion for your consideration, is to take out concept plan because it's not really a regulatory plan. We could replace that with a sketch plan if that makes sense. To answer your question, Councilmember,
I said the concept plan.
so we can so the concept plan can come out first of all, because that's really a 30-day sort of get our comments kind of an application. It's not a regulatory application. For the others, I think it's really difficult to parse out which ones would come at which stage, because it's often not a linear development process in terms of applications. A lot of times we'll get one preliminary plan for the whole site, and then we'll get site plans block by block. And it really depends on which block is available to meet the market and build a project at a given time. So it's not like block 9 is coming further later than block 1. It might come the other way around. Oftentimes we also get amendments to site plans, because some of these projects literally can last a long time. And those amendments are changing like a small thing. Like it can be as small as like taking out a few lights here and putting them there, to taking out a use and replacing it with another use. We did provide in the procedures and exemptions, I think there are some guardrails on this whole policy in general, that you can't forever keep changing things and coming under the old thing, under the old system. You'll have to flip the switch at some point. But for the CRT zone parcels in particular, we think it's appropriate to let them have the flexibility, particularly because we are talking about projects that are less than 1 FAR in total development. So even the public benefits that are being considered here are very...
Not losing a lot in that context.
No, we're not going to lose out on a lot, but it is going to create a different set of rules in the second half of the game, so to speak. And that can be really problematic for projects trying to secure financing or...
Yeah, the only other thing that I want to note is we're talking about the mapped height. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a misnomer when we say incentive density, as if we're providing new incentives. It's different from the pilot that we were talking about before, where you are providing an incentive. There's a public policy reason for it. We can agree or disagree whether it's the exact right one and exact right approach. In this case, it's the mapped density. Mm-hmm. So we have made a decision that this is the appropriate density that we want, and then we're essentially extracting public benefits to the extent that we can in order to get to the amount of housing and mixed-use development that we want. The unintended consequence here, I just think we ought to be careful, is if we set a new trigger, these are going through standard method currently. They're going to go back to the drawing board, and there's going to be a whole new public outreach dynamic. That, the carefully constructed agreements that could have been made over the course of many months or years, oftentimes will essentially be thrown out and started over. So the level of disruption that this could create, not just for the financing of an individual project or a phase, et cetera, but for the entire implementation of core aspects of certain master plans, could be put in jeopardy, and that could be as much of a detriment to the community as it could be to the applicant. So I just, I think it's a really important question. I think the adjustment of concept plan, eliminating that and replacing with sketch plan, at least from my perspective, makes sense. That accomplishes what the intent was, and make sure that the push was ensured, and that planning has weighed in. I think that the slight tweak by council staff, we have kind of an amendment to an amendment to an amendment, I think strikes that right balance. But I just think it's important to acknowledge, if we don't strike the right balance, what this could mean. And it actually could mean something that is going through standard method has to go through optional method, and in so doing, a carefully constructed agreement that has been made over the course of months or years could be thrown by the wayside and started over. All the staff time, all of the investment, all of the public and community input could be essentially thrown out, which would not be an outcome that I think any of us would hope for, would want. So
So sketch plan.
yes,
Or concept
well,
plan.
so eliminate concept plan, replace it with sketch plan, and adopt Ms. Nadeau's suggested tweak, just to clarify at the end of the proposed amendment. Do you want to just read it for us into the record so that everybody's clear? Because amendment to an amendment to an amendment can be a little confusing if people don't have it in front of them.
Any development application in process in the CRT zone on or before effective date, including an approved or filed for approval of a sketch plan, preliminary plan, site plan, conditional use, local map amendment, record plat, or building permit, must be reviewed where the maximum total standard method FAR is the greater of 1 FAR or 10,000 square feet of gross floor area. The approval of any of these applications or amendments under Section 453A3 must allow the applicant to proceed through any other required application or step in the process within the time allowed by law or plan approval under the maximum total standard method FAR at the time of the original approval.
Sounds good. Thank you for the discussion. We will adopt that amendment as amended twice without objection from colleagues. And I think that takes us to the end of our decision points today,
Technical amendments.
besides technical amendments.
So the first is a suggestion from DEP. The ZTA referred to the Green Code, and they asked to instead refer to it as the International Green Construction Code. That's the first technical amendment.
Objection?
And then,
Non-sarcastic objection?
and then the second one is replacing LEED BD plus C version 4.1 with the most recent version of LEED BD plus C at the time of approval. The reason for this is a comment from DEP. They are currently working on version 5.
Make it evergreen as well, without
Yes.
objection.
Yep. And that is it for ZTA 25.
All right. Without objection, we will take up all of those technical amendments. Appreciate all of the work. This has been a multi-year effort by the planning department. We really appreciate it, and the work and thoughts of the planning board. Really appreciate Ms. Nadeau and the rest of council staff for their input on this, and Ms. Nadeau for carrying us through this session, and to colleagues for the thoughtful discussion. We have full consensus on everything. We have a bring back item for full council where we will discuss that one item with input. Council staff and planning staff will work together to come up with good scenarios that will help us understand and be illustrative of what the decision point would be, and then we'll make a decision on that one item at full council. But with that, without objection, we will positively review this 3-0 out of committee and forward it to the full council for consideration. All right. Thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.
WPDD 1070.